The afternoon rain was gentle, the kind that feels more like mist than precipitation, falling softly against the windows of Evergreen Market like a lullaby being whispered from the sky. Inside, the store was warm. The lights were soft and amber-colored, casting everything in a hue that suggested comfort, suggested that the world beyond the glass doors was cold and uncertain. But in here, in this space, everything was okay. Claire had been the store manager at Evergreen Market for 7 years. She knew every corner of it, every shelf, every regular customer. She knew which tiles on the floor squeaked when you walked on them, where the best light fell through the windows at different times of day, which customers preferred their paper bags packed gently, and which didn't mind rougher handling. She knew these things the way someone knows their own home, not through conscious effort, but through years of presence, through paying attention, through caring about the details of a place you've committed yourself to. This particular afternoon, Claire was restocking the tea section. This was her favorite task, one she saved for the quiet times when business was slow. The rain always made business slow. People stayed home when it rained like this. People curled up with warm drinks and books and blankets, and they didn't venture out to stores. She held the boxes of tea gently, reading the names as she placed them on the shelves. Chamomile, lavender, something called Sleepy Time, with a cartoon moon on the box. She smiled at that. She had always believed in the small kindnesses of marketing, the way a picture of a moon could promise rest, the way soft colors could promise peace. She believed that the packages we buy are as much about hope as they are about the actual product inside. The store was quiet around her. Only the soft sound of the rain outside, the gentle hum of the refrigeration units in the back, the occasional quiet shuffle of a customer browsing the aisles. Her 2 employees, Marco and Yuki, were in the back doing inventory. Claire had deliberately chosen this time to work alone on the tea section, had chosen this small pocket of solitude to do something that felt meditative, something that felt like she was contributing something beautiful to the world, even if no one was watching. Claire was 54 years old, and she had learned over the years that meaning didn't always announce itself. Meaning didn't have to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes meaning lived in small moments, in the care you took stocking shelves, in remembering that Mrs. Chen always bought chamomile because it helped her sleep, in making sure the store was clean and well lit so that people who came in from the rain would feel held and cared for. She had not always been this way. There had been a time, years ago, when Claire had wanted more, wanted ambition, wanted recognition, wanted to climb some ladder that she wasn't even sure she believed in anymore. She had been married then to a man named Robert who had wanted to climb that ladder very badly. He had wanted her to climb it too, had wanted them to build something impressive together. But Claire had wanted something different. She had wanted to help people. She had wanted to tend to things. She had wanted to make spaces that were warm and safe. The divorce had been quiet, the way hers always seemed to be. Quiet and sad and ultimately right. Robert had gone on to build impressive things in the city. Claire had stayed here, in this small town, in this store, and had slowly come to understand that this was not a compromise. This was not settling. This was exactly what she wanted. 7 years at Evergreen Market. 7 years of learning the rhythms of it, of building community, of creating a place where people felt genuinely welcomed. She made reasonable money. She had a small apartment with big windows and a garden where she grew herbs. She had friends, not a huge circle, but true ones. People who knew her name, who asked about her days, who understood that her life was small but full. But there was a loneliness to it sometimes. Not the painful kind of loneliness, but the quiet kind. The kind that comes from living a life that is mostly private. The kind that whispers in the evenings. Is this enough? Are you building something that matters? Will anyone remember the care you took with these small things? Claire didn't think about these questions very often. They weren't helpful. But sometimes, on rainy afternoons when the store was slow and she was arranging tea boxes, they would appear. Gentle, not demanding, just present. She was on the last shelf, nearly finished with her work, when she heard the bell above the door chime. A customer coming in from the rain. Claire didn't look up. She had learned that sometimes people needed a moment to adjust to being inside, to shake off the damp of the outside world and settle into the warmth. She would greet them when they were ready. But as the minutes passed and she finished her task, Claire became aware that something was different about this customer. The energy in the store felt different. It felt heavier somehow. Not bad, but present. Like there was something large and sad and tired in the space with her. Claire turned to look. Standing in the middle of the store, near the front window, was a woman. She was in her 60s maybe, with gray hair that was wet from the rain. She was wearing a thin jacket, not nearly warm enough for the weather, and she was standing very still, water dripping quietly onto the floor, her eyes distant. her expression somewhere between lost and exhausted. Claire recognized that look. She had learned to recognize it over 7 years of working in a place where people came when they didn't know where else to go. It was the look of someone carrying something too heavy, someone who had been carrying it too long, someone who might break if the wrong person spoke too loudly, or didn't speak at all. Claire set down her last box of tea and walked slowly toward the woman. She didn't rush. She didn't make sudden movements. She moved the way you move when you're trying not to startle something that's already frightened. "Welcome to Evergreen Market," she said softly. "Can I help you find anything?" The woman looked at her, and her eyes were kind, Claire thought. Tired, but kind. "I'm just—" The woman started, then stopped. "I'm sorry, I'm just getting out of the rain for a moment." "That's perfectly fine," Claire said, and she meant it completely. "Take as long as you need. Can I get you anything? We have some warm tea, hot coffee. There are bathrooms in the back if you'd like to dry off." The woman shook her head. "No, I'm fine. I'll just look around." But Claire could see that she wasn't fine. Claire could see that the woman was standing in the middle of a grocery store, drenched and tired, and something had broken inside her, or was breaking, or had been breaking for a very long time. Claire moved back to her tea section, but she kept the woman in her peripheral vision. She watched as the woman slowly moved through the store, not really looking for anything, just wandering, moving through the aisles the way someone moves through a dream. And then, after about 20 minutes, the woman came to the tea section, where Claire was standing, and she looked at the boxes on the shelf. "Do you have anything that helps you sleep?" the woman asked quietly. And in that moment, Claire understood. Something had shifted. The woman had come into this store broken about something, and now she was asking for help, and Claire was being given the gift of being able to offer it. The woman's name was Diana, and she sat in the small break room at the back of Evergreen Market with a cup of hot chamomile tea in her hands. Still damp from the rain, her shoulders slowly beginning to relax as the warmth seeped into her bones. Claire had made the tea carefully, had heated the water to exactly the right temperature, had placed a small ceramic cup on a small ceramic saucer, had arranged everything with the same care she used when she arranged the tea boxes on the shelf. Each small gesture was a message. You matter. You are worth caring for. Let me hold this with you. "I'm sorry," Diana said for perhaps the 5th time. "I'm sorry for being strange. I'm just having a very difficult day." "You don't need to apologize," Claire said gently. She was sitting across from Diana, a cup of her own tea warming her hands. "Difficult days exist. They happen to all of us. There's no shame in having one." Diana looked at her, and something in her face softened slightly. "You're kind," she said. "That's rare." "Kindness isn't rare," Claire replied. "People are just scared to show it sometimes. They think it makes them weak, or that it's wasteful to give it to strangers. But I've never believed that." Diana was quiet for a moment. Then, though a dam had been waiting for permission to break, she began to talk. She told Claire that her name was Diana Vasquez, that she was 62 years old, that she had spent the last 40 years of her life taking care of people. First her children, 4 of them, now all grown, all living in different cities, all with their own lives that didn't have much room for her anymore. Then her mother, whom she had nursed through dementia for 7 years. Then her husband, who had developed heart disease, and whom she had cared for until he passed 3 years ago. "I don't regret any of it," Diana said, her voice soft and steady. "I loved them. I was honored to care for them. But somewhere along the way," she paused, searching for words. "Somewhere along the way, I forgot who I was. I became the person who cares for others, and I forgot that I was also a person who deserved to be cared for." Claire listened without interrupting. This was one of the greatest gifts you could give someone, the gift of truly listening, of not jumping in with advice or solutions, of just creating space for them to speak their truth. Diana continued. 3 months ago, my youngest son, Marcus, he's been living in Colorado, he asked me to come live with him. He said the house was too big for me to manage alone. He said I should be with family. He said, Diana's voice caught slightly. He said I should stop being a burden. "He used that word?" Claire asked gently. "Burden?" Diana nodded. "He didn't mean it harshly. He was trying to help, I think. But that's when I realized I had given so much of myself that I had become an obligation. I had cared so well that I had become something to be managed, rather than someone to be loved." "That sounds very painful," Claire said. "It is," Diana said, and her eyes filled with tears, but they were slow tears, gentle tears. Not the tears of someone breaking, but the tears of someone who was finally allowing themselves to feel. "So, I said no. I said I would figure it out on my own. And I did, for a little while. But then, today, Today I went to the apartment I'm renting, and I looked at the empty rooms, and I looked at myself in the mirror, and I realized that I don't know who Diana Vasquez is when she's not taking care of anyone. I don't know what I want. I don't know what I like. I don't know how to just exist in the world as myself, without a purpose beyond myself. She set down her tea and put her face in her hands. But she wasn't sobbing. She was just sitting with the sadness, holding it, allowing it to move through her. Claire reached across the table and placed her hand gently on Diana's arm. She didn't say anything. She just held the presence of compassion in the space between them. After a few minutes, Diana looked up. Her eyes were wet, but clearer. I was standing in the rain, she said, and I felt like I was drowning, even though I was just getting wet. And I didn't know where to go, so I came here. And you were so kind to me, and you didn't ask me a lot of questions. You just... Diana paused, searching for words. You just held space for me. You made me tea. You treated me like I mattered. You do matter, Claire said quietly. Of course you matter. I keep forgetting that, Diana said. I spent so long mattering to people, being important to them, being needed by them. And I forgot what it felt like to just matter, to exist and be enough, just as I am. They sat together in the warm break room, drinking their tea, listening to the sound of the rain continuing outside. After a while, Diana smiled, a small smile, but a real one. I've known you for an hour, she said, and you've done more for me than anyone has in years. You did it for yourself, Claire said. I just made tea and listened. You're the one who had the courage to say the truth out loud. You're the one who's brave enough to figure out who you are. That's all you. The rain continued through the evening. After a while, Claire suggested that Diana come home with her. I have a guest room, she said gently, and it's getting late. You shouldn't navigate the wet streets alone, just for tonight, just so you have a safe place to rest. And Diana, who had not been held safely in a very long time, had said yes. Claire's apartment was exactly what Diana would have imagined if she'd known to imagine it. It was small and warm, with large windows that overlooked a garden even in winter. There were books everywhere, on shelves, stacked on tables, piled in corners, all of them well-loved, with bent spines and notes in the margins. There was soft lighting, warm blankets, photographs of what seemed to be friends at various ages, at various moments of joy. It was the home of someone who had learned how to make peace with solitude. Not loneliness, but solitude. The difference between being alone and being at home. Claire made a simple dinner, soup and bread, the kind of food that feels less like a meal and more like a hug. They ate together at a small table by the window, and they didn't need to talk much. The comfort was in the quiet sharing. The comfort was in two people being together, caring for each other through the simple act of presence. After dinner, Claire showed Diana to the guest room. It was small but beautiful. A window with a view of the sleeping garden, a bed with white sheets and a soft quilt, a small lamp on the nightstand, fresh flowers in a vase on the dresser. How is this? Claire asked softly. It's perfect, Diana said, and she was crying again, but these were different tears. These were tears of gratitude, tears of having been cared for, tears of feeling, for the first time in a long time, that her existence was not a burden, but a blessing. Sleep well, Claire said. Tomorrow will still be there, but you can rest tonight. That's all you need to do. But Diana didn't sleep immediately. She sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, just looking around the room, looking at the way Claire had arranged things with such care, looking at the evidence of a life lived thoughtfully. And something shifted in her. Some small seed of understanding began to germinate. She thought about Claire, a woman she had met only hours ago, a woman who had shown her kindness without expectation, a woman who had taken her into her home, fed her, given her a safe place to rest. And Diana understood something then. She understood that this was what mattered, not the big dramatic gestures, not the sacrifices that were meant to be noticed and appreciated, but the small, quiet acts of kindness that came from a place of genuine care. And Diana understood something else. Claire had not become less important by giving that kindness. She had become more important. She had become someone that Diana would remember forever, someone whose gentle strength would change the trajectory of her life. In the darkness of the guest room, Diana allowed herself to cry more fully. Not tears of despair, but tears of release, tears of finally being held. And slowly, as her tears quieted, as her breathing became deeper and slower, she felt something like peace begin to settle over her, like a blanket being gently drawn up to her chin, like safety, like home. In the other room, Claire lay in her own bed, and she was thinking about Diana. She was thinking about the weight the woman had been carrying. She was thinking about all the ways that caring for others could cost you yourself if you weren't careful. And she was thinking about why this mattered so much. Claire had spent 7 years tending to her small corner of the world. She had stocked shelves, remembered names, made people feel welcome. She had told herself that this was enough, that this was meaningful. But somewhere deep inside, she had wondered, does anyone notice? Does any of this matter? And now, here was the answer. Here was a woman who had come in from the rain completely lost, and Claire had given her tea and listening and a safe place to sleep, and it had mattered so much that it had changed Diana's entire understanding of herself. Claire understood then that she had been right all along, that the small acts of kindness were not small at all, that they were, in fact, the largest things, that she had been building something beautiful all along. She just hadn't known how to see it. The next morning, Diana woke to soft light falling across the guest room bed. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. For a moment, there was the old panic, that confused moment of not recognizing your surroundings. But then she remembered the rain, the store, Claire's kind eyes, the simple dinner, the soft bed. And instead of panic, she felt something else. She felt calm. She felt rested in a way she hadn't felt in years. She found Claire in the kitchen, making breakfast. Soft scrambled eggs, toast with jam, tea in ceramic cups. Everything done with that same quality of care that Claire brought to everything. "Good morning," Claire said, and she smiled. It was a smile that said, "I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you slept well. I'm glad we're having breakfast together." And Diana realized something. She realized that she had forgotten what it felt like to be welcomed, to be wanted, not as a caregiver, not as someone useful, but just as a person, just as Diana. They ate breakfast together, and this time Diana was ready to talk. She told Claire about her children, about the ache of loving them, and then slowly watching them move away from her, about the joy of caring for her mother, and the grief of watching her mind fade, about her husband, about 20 years of good marriage and 5 years of illness and 3 years of absence. "I made myself so small," Diana said, "trying to fit into everyone else's lives. I made myself smaller and smaller until I almost disappeared." "But you didn't disappear," Claire said gently. "You're here. You're still here." "I know," Diana said, "but I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know what I want. I don't know what makes me happy." Claire was quiet for a moment, then she said, "What made you happy when you were young, before all the caregiving started?" Diana thought about this. "I used to paint," she said slowly, as though remembering a dream. "I was actually quite good at it. I wanted to be an artist, but then I got married and had children and life happened and I just forgot about it. Put it away like you put away winter clothes when spring comes." "Do you still have any of your paintings?" Claire asked. Diana shook her head. "I gave them away years ago. I don't even know where they are." "Then maybe," Claire said, "we could start again. We could go buy some supplies and some paper, and you could paint again. Not to become someone important or impressive, just for yourself, just because you want to." And Diana felt something bloom in her chest, something like hope, something like permission. Over the next few days, Diana stayed with Claire. Not indefinitely. They both knew that was not sustainable, that eventually Diana would need to return to her apartment and build her own life. But for these days, they created something together, a rhythm, a routine, a small world just big enough for two people learning how to care for each other. In the mornings, they would wake and make tea together. Diana was learning how Claire did it, the exact temperature of water, the exact amount of time to steep, the way you could tell by the color of the liquid whether it was ready. These small details seemed suddenly important, seemed suddenly like ways of paying attention to life. In the afternoons, they would paint. Claire had supplies from a hobby she'd abandoned years ago, and together they sat at the kitchen table with watercolors and paper, and Diana began to rediscover something she had thought was lost forever. The muscle memory of how to hold a brush, the instinctive knowledge of how colors combined, the joy of creating something just for the pleasure of creating it. "You're good," Claire said, watching Diana paint a simple landscape, a tree, a field, a sky. "I'm rusty," Diana replied, but she was smiling. "But it feels good. It feels like coming home." "That's what art is," Claire said. "It's a way of coming home to yourself." In the evenings, they would sit on Claire's couch with blankets pulled around them, and they would talk. Deep, slow conversations about life and loss and love and what it meant to build a meaningful existence. About how serving others was beautiful, but how you also had to serve yourself. About how solitude could be healing if you approached it with gentleness. About how the things that seemed most broken might actually be transforming into something new. And Diana began to understand something. She began to understand that she had not failed. She had not lost her life to caregiving. She had lived a life of caregiving, had built meaning through it, had loved deeply. But that chapter was closing, and a new chapter was beginning. And in that new chapter, she could love herself the way she had loved others. She could care for herself with the same devotion she had shown to everyone else. One evening, about a week after she had arrived, Diana was preparing dinner in Claire's kitchen. They had begun taking turns, and she was moving around the space with a new kind of confidence. She knew where things were now. She knew the rhythm of Claire's kitchen. She was home here, in this small space, in this quiet life. "I need to go back to my apartment soon," Diana said gently. "I need to build my own life. But I want you to know something. I want you to know that you've changed me, that you've shown me something I had forgotten." "What's that?" Claire asked. "That I'm worth caring for," Diana said simply. "That I matter. Not because I'm useful or needed by anyone, but just because I exist. You showed me that by the way you treated me, by the tea, by the meal, by letting me sleep in a safe place, by sitting with me in the sadness without trying to fix it. You showed me." Claire reached over and took Diana's hand. "You always mattered," she said softly. "You just forgot. But you remembered. That's the important part. You remembered." Diana moved back to her apartment on a soft morning when the sky was pale and the rain had finally stopped. But she didn't move away from Claire. She couldn't. What had begun in that store, in that moment of deep human connection, couldn't be severed by physical distance. They had woven themselves into each other's lives now. They had become each other's people. Diana started coming to Evergreen Market every week. She would arrive in the late afternoon and sit in the break room with a cup of tea, and sometimes she would just be there, reading, painting, existing quietly in the warmth of the place. Other times she would help Claire stock shelves, would help arrange the displays, would help with the simple work of keeping the store beautiful and welcoming. And slowly, without anyone planning it, Diana began to become part of the store's fabric. One day, a young mother came in, looking completely overwhelmed. Her child was sick. She was worried about money. Her partner had left her. Everything felt like too much. And Diana recognized that look, because she had been that person, or had lived with that person, or had cared for people in that state countless times. And instead of just shopping, Diana sat down with this woman and had tea with her and listened to her story. And the woman left, feeling held, feeling less alone. Then another customer, a man in his 70s who had lost his wife, came in one afternoon and Diana was there. And they had a conversation about grief, about how it never truly ends, but how it changes shape over time. About how you learn to carry it the way you learn to carry anything, slowly, with breaks, with the help of other people. And Claire, watching this unfold, understood something profound. She understood that Diana's gift for caring had not been lost or wasted. It was simply transforming. Diana was learning to care for people in a different way, not from a place of obligation or self-sacrifice, but from a place of genuine human compassion, from a place of having been held and knowing what it felt like and wanting to pass that on. Claire also started to understand something about herself. She had always thought her life was small. She had thought that because she worked in a store, because she lived in a quiet apartment, because she didn't have grand ambitions, that what she was doing didn't matter much. But now she could see it clearly. She could see that she had been creating a space where people could be healed, where people could come in from the rain and know that they would be welcomed, where the simple act of stocking shelves with care was actually an act of love, because every time someone bought tea from that shelf, they were touching something that had been arranged by hands that cared about them, even if they'd never met. One afternoon, several months after Diana had first come into the store, Claire and Diana were sitting in the back room when Claire said something she had been thinking about for a while. "I think I want to make this place bigger," she said. "Not bigger physically, but bigger in purpose. I think I want to create a space where people can come and be healed, where we have conversations, not just transactions, where people know they're welcome to sit and rest if they need to, where the store is also a sanctuary." Diana looked at her with such tenderness. "That's what it already is," she said gently. "Look around you, look at what you've already created." And Claire realized that Diana was right. She had already done this. She had already been doing this all along. She just needed to see it. She needed to give it permission. She needed to acknowledge that this wasn't just a job or a compromise, but a calling, a beautiful, quiet calling to create spaces where people could be held. That evening, after the store closed, Claire did something she hadn't done in years. She sat down at her old art supplies and began to paint. Not a landscape or a portrait, but something abstract. Something that captured the feeling of that afternoon when Diana had walked in from the rain. something that captured the color of warmth, the texture of care, the shape of compassion. As she painted, she realized something. She realized that she and Diana had been on mirror paths. Diana had spent so long caring for others that she'd forgotten to care for herself. Claire had spent so long believing that her quiet life didn't matter that she'd forgotten to appreciate what she had built. But together, they had remembered. Together, they had reminded each other that small things were not small at all, that quiet beauty was still beauty, that one person showing genuine care to another person was not a small thing. It was everything. 6 months later, as spring was beginning to whisper its way into the world, Diana officially left her apartment and moved into a small room in Claire's building, not back into the guest room where she had first slept, but a room of her own, right next door, with a door between them that was always open. They did not call it living together, though technically they were. They called it what it was, two people choosing to share their lives, not out of obligation or desperation, but out of genuine love. Out of having discovered each other at exactly the moment when they needed each other most. Diana turned the small room into a studio, her easel by the window, her paints organized carefully, the walls slowly filling with paintings that grew more confident and colorful as the months passed. She had returned to something she thought was lost, and it had bloomed even more beautifully than before, because now it came from a place of healing rather than ambition. She also started leading a gentle art class at Evergreen Market every Saturday afternoon. "Come paint with me," the sign said, and people came. Teenagers who were struggling with depression, mothers who had forgotten how to do things just for themselves, elderly people who wanted to create something beautiful before they died, young professionals who had buried their joy under spreadsheets and meetings. They came, and they painted, and they discovered that creating something beautiful was a form of prayer, a form of healing, a form of saying, "I matter. My existence is not just about productivity or obligation, I matter." Claire's role at the store transformed too. She stepped back from some of the day-to-day management and brought in Marco and Yuki as co-managers. She reduced her hours, but the hours she worked became more intentional. She spent more time in conversation with customers. She created a quiet corner in the store, with comfortable chairs and soft lighting where people could sit if they needed to. She made tea constantly, so much tea that she started ordering it in bulk. The store became known throughout the town not as a place to shop, but as a place to be held. People came and sat quietly. People came and cried. People came and discovered, through Claire's gentle presence, that they were not alone in their struggles, that the world could be kind, that there were people who cared about the simple fact of their existence. One rainy evening, it was raining again, like the night Diana had first appeared. Claire and Diana sat together in the apartment, watching the rain fall softly against the window. "Do you remember," Diana said, "that first day? Do you remember how lost I felt?" "I remember," Claire said. "You were so tired, so broken." "I was," Diana agreed. "But you held that broken place with such gentleness. You didn't try to fix it, you just held it, and it healed." "You held me too," Claire said. "You helped me see that what I was doing mattered, that my small life was actually a large life, that I had been building something beautiful all along." They sat in silence, listening to the rain. And the silence was not empty. It was full of everything that had happened between them, full of tea and soup and paintings and conversations, full of two people showing each other that they mattered, full of the quiet revolution that happens when one person decides to truly see another person and to care for them. "I was afraid," Diana said slowly, "that I would fall apart when my children didn't need me anymore, that I would become nothing. But instead, I became myself. I became Diana, not Diana the caregiver, but Diana the painter, Diana the healer, Diana the friend, Diana the person who matters just by existing." "You always mattered," Claire said gently. "You were just so busy holding others that you forgot to hold yourself." "And you," Diana said, turning to look at Claire, "you were so sure your life was too small to matter. But look what you built. Look at all these people. Look at what your gentleness has done to this town." Claire didn't say anything. She just reached over and took Diana's hand, and they sat together as the rain continued its soft, patient work outside. Much later, after Diana had fallen asleep in her room, Claire went to the window and looked out at the sleeping city. She thought about the woman who had come in from the rain 6 months ago. She thought about how you never know when your life will change, how you never know when a stranger will walk through your door and transform everything, how the small acts of kindness you do every day, without knowing their impact, might be building something that heals the world. She thought about the tea she had made, about the meal she had shared, about the simple decision to see someone who was suffering and to respond with gentleness instead of turning away. And she understood, finally, completely, that this was everything. This was the meaning she had been searching for. This was the purpose that her life had always held, whether she'd known it or not. Not grand purpose, but real purpose. Human purpose. The purpose of one person showing another person that they mattered. The rain continued to fall softly, the way rain falls on nights like this, when the world is finally quiet enough to hear its whisper. And in the apartment, in their separate rooms, that were really one room, because the door between them was always open, two women slept peacefully, held by the knowledge that they had found each other, that they had chosen each other, that they were no longer alone. Outside, in the sleeping town, in the quiet stores and dark streets and small houses, there were people who carried the warmth of their kindness in their hearts. People who had come into Evergreen Market and had been held. People who had learned, through Claire's gentleness and Diana's presence, that the world could be beautiful, that people could care, that they mattered. And in that quiet knowing, in that slow spreading of warmth from heart to heart, something larger was being healed, something ancient and wounded in the world was being gently mended by two people who had decided to be kind, who had decided to see each other, who had decided that the small acts of love were not small at all, but everything. The lighthouse beam of human kindness swept across the world, and everywhere it touched, something woke up. Something remembered that it was worth loving. Something came home, and as the rain fell softly, as the night deepened into dreams, as the world moved into sleep, there was peace. There was the knowing that tomorrow would come, and it would be full of the same possibility that today had been full of tea and conversation and the simple beauty of being seen, full of the quiet revolution that happens when one person decides to show another person. You matter. You are worth caring for. You are not alone. This was the story. This was the meaning. This was enough. This was everything. Sleep now. Rest. Know that you are held. Know that you matter. Know that, like Diana, like Claire, you are exactly where you're meant to be. Rest now. Everything is going to be okay.